Amitabha. Sean was a large man, about 6 feet tall, with the build of someone who took his daily exercise routine very seriously. A lifetime of being a black man in the United States had imbued in him an ever-ready innate wariness, one that could sense imminent danger and possibly prevent a bad situation from worsening. Many years in a correctional center had taught him the advantage of displaying a habitual, don't mess with me demeanor. The last few of those years had left him with a deepening understanding of Buddhism and its teachings on cause and effect. He had an appreciation of how current actions determined his future. Importantly, he was aware of how the teachings could help him more wisely conduct himself when confronted with dangerous situations. One day, Sean found himself the focus of several inmates who were purposefully approaching him. As they silently came to a menacing halt a few feet before him, he became aware that a few others had come up behind him. Understanding what was happening, he drew upon all he had learned from Buddhism. Sean knew that if he allowed himself to be goaded into fighting and reacted as anticipated, there would be harsh consequences. Immediate ones would include physical injury or worse, solitary confinement, the loss of the few privileges that made his life bearable, and a negative report on his record. But as severe as these would be, he knew that karmic ones would be even more so. Bad actions, as he learned in Buddhism, eventually cause more suffering. Bad karmic relationships had already reached the point where half a dozen men had come together to injure him. Existing enmities with the men surrounding him will grow if a fight ensues. The rage was palpable. Fighting would only increase it. Sean knew he had to remain focused and calm. He needed to take control of the situation, not with his fists, but by exuding utmost confidence in what he had learned from Buddhism, so that the men would sense his determination to stick to his principles and not be drawn into a fight. And in grudging admiration of the resoluteness that produced it, they would back off. It was a considerable risk because his not fighting had to be recognized not as his being frozen in terror, not as a weakness in any way, but as a strength of character to be respected. Clearly, he had pulled it off because he was standing in front of me, neither injured nor on his way to solitary confinement. After telling me what had happened, he mused how his actions had taken courage. He admitted this not in a spirit of bravado, but in some moments of honest reflection, reflection that was spot on. Courage is doing what is morally right in the face of resistance or possible harm. It can be the determination to persevere with what is right, even when fearful, hoping that choosing the right thing may be such a powerful lesson that the other person may learn as well. Courage is, quote, not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality, end quote, as defined by the literary scholar C.S. Lewis. The highest reality in an account like Sean's is that harming another living being is morally wrong. This concept is so fundamental that the first precept in Buddhism is do not kill. Sean didn't just know the precept, he understood what it implied and what it required of him. He knew that fighting would worsen a bad karmic relationship. Over lifetimes, as the victim and the perpetrator take turns in being one or the other, the hatred will increase until it explodes. And one of them kills the other in a self-replicating, ever-increasing cycle of hostility. The hostility will continue to feed upon itself, drawing in more individuals and resulting in more hatred and death. The way to stop such a devastating karmic progression is to choose not to react from anger, but from understanding. Do not kill means do not harm. Not harming requires letting go of fear, bitterness, and revenge. Not just because they will invariably lead to painful retributions, but because they cause others pain and the subsequent suffering that follows. This understanding can translate into some very simple advice. Don't make a bad situation worse. After having managed that, we can determine if there is some way to make that bad situation better through courage. We've seen several examples of this in previous talks. In the talk titled "It Was a Mistake," we learned that in Manuel, the boy who had shot Debbie Bakery when he was 13 and was experiencing his second Christmas Eve in prison, impulsively called her to apologize. Last time Ian heard Debbie speak was at his sentencing trial, when she said that she didn't believe he cared about what he had done. Despite the painful memory of her harsh condemnation, Ian called her and wished her a Merry Christmas and apologized for shooting her. When she asked why he had done it, he replied that it was a mistake. It had all happened so quickly. He then asked if he could call her again. She said yes. Both Ian and Debbie had acted courageously. Ian took the initiative to call Debbie on the prison phones designated for collect calls to apologize to her. His call wasn't the result of some prison-sponsored program. It came from the personal admission of someone who knew that he had caused an innocent stranger much suffering and who felt compelled to apologize. Frankly, most of us struggle to get out even a mumbled sorry. We can only imagine the courage it took a young teenager to call a woman whom he had shot and say he was sorry. The wish to apologize, to do what was morally right at the risk of her refusing his call or furiously condemning him, would have halted most of us. But not Ian. He felt compelled to apologize. Over time, he did something else he felt was necessary. He redeemed and transformed himself. In a system that seems designed to shatter a person's will to survive and destroy any remaining trace of self-worth. With courage and hope, he clung to both his sanity and his determination to better himself. For her part, Debbie was also courageous. She accepted Ian's unexpected Christmas Eve call. Then, even though the memory of being shot by a gun held inches from her face must have come rushing back, along with the fear that Ian knew how to find her, she spoke calmly with him. After the call was completed, Debbie intermittently communicated with Ian for many years, even though her family members were initially set against her doing so and tried to discourage her. Debbie felt that while 13-year-old children do stupid things, they are entitled to, indeed should have, the chance to learn from their mistakes. And in time, Debbie had the courage to forgive Ian. She said that actually it wasn't that hard. And when he was released after a resentencing trial, Debbie was there for him. Meeting as planned, close to where it all began, Ian and Debbie hugged one another for 2 minutes. Another account in which courage played a part in forgiveness. In being at peace, we learned how, upon catching up with his buddies after a phone call about a brewing fight, Jacob killed an innocent passerby. After his so-called friends turned him in, Jacob spent months in jail, viewing himself as the victim. Finally, he admitted to himself that the man he killed and his parents were the victims. Jacob could do nothing to change what he had done. But after his release, he learned that he could take responsibility for his actions by participating in a restorative justice program. He could apologize to David and Joan, answer their questions, and meet with them if they wished. He could allow them to express their pain and anger and try to help them heal and find peace by expressing his deep remorse. He later admitted that opening the door, looking them in the eye, and apologizing was the most difficult thing he had done. It took David and Joan courage to agree to communicate with their son's killer, knowing the raw pain such an interaction would revive. But when they learned that while Jacob had served his sentence, nothing had been done to help rehabilitate himself or reflect on his actions, they decided it was up to them to ensure that Jacob's time in jail hadn't been wasted. They started out to reach him by writing to him. Through getting to know of his sincere remorse, they forgave and saved the man who killed their son. And through that forgiveness, they let bitterness go and found peace. In these three accounts, we see how courage was manifested by ordinary people doing extraordinarily difficult things. Sean silently and steadfastly refused to fight when goaded. Ian apologized for having shot Debbie, and Debbie forgave and encouraged him to redeem himself. Jacob apologized for having killed a couple's son, and they forgave him and then helped him to change his life. Such courage does not come easily, but it can accomplish so much. It can enable us to move in a direction contrary to popular opinion, even though we know that our actions will likely set us up for ridicule or perhaps physical harm. It can help us break away from what is habitual and self-protective and to admit that we did something wrong. And to do so even while knowing that our actions will tarnish the favorable opinion others have of us or set ourselves up for unpleasant consequences. But we persevere nonetheless. Courage can help us to look within and understand that holding on to our rage and desire for revenge harms us more than the one who hurt us. We are the one gripping that burning coal with no intention of dropping it. Understandable, but tragic. We need to drop the red-hot coal of rage and hate that we hold. Only then can we stop violence from escalating and end the suffering and pain within us. We need to foster healing and peace instead. The courage to forgive can do this. Bitterness and revenge cannot. Courage can enable us to stop focusing on our pain and consider how the person who caused it was acting out of their own pain. A different pain from ours, but clearly overwhelming. With such understanding, we can accept that due to pain and fear, others do stupid things that, if they are fortunate, they come to deeply regret and do something about. With such understanding, we can forgive the one who harmed us, even when those around us think we're crazy, wrong, or at the very least, foolish to do so. Courage can enable us to open our hearts and minds to see the other person not as an unredeemable enemy to be despised and punished, but as a fallible, imperfect human, just like us. And to understand that helping a person redeem themselves is akin to saving a life, analogous to saving a child from drowning in their ignorance and pain. Courage is doing the right thing in the face of opposition and difficulty. It is truly the form of every virtue at the testing point, at the point of highest reality. And it lies at the heart of forgiveness. Amitofo.